Hey there, wonderful listeners. Welcome back to Grandma's Real Stories. If you're just tuning in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a follow, and drop a comment below. It really helps us keep these stories alive. Today, we're unearthing a story that proves some legacies aren't found in a will, but hidden within the very fabric of family. Imagine a lifetime of unspoken truths, buried deeper than any grave. A secret so profound, it could shatter everything you thought you knew about the people you love most. This is the story of a twisted inheritance, not of wealth but of silence, and the staggering price it demands. There's a comfort in the familiar, isn't there? A soft, warm blanket woven from cherished memories and well-worn anecdotes. For me, that blanket was Grandma Elira's stories of our family's history, a vibrant tapestry of shared joy that I realize now was missing a crucial thread. A thread that, once pulled, threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew. Curled on the plush window seat, the afternoon sun, warm and buttery, painted stripes across her favorite novel. Beside her, Grandma Elira meticulously arranged dried flowers in a vase. Each movement was gentle, deliberate, almost meditative, a living picture of serene contentment. It was in these quiet, golden hours that she would often drift back to her past, her voice a soothing balm. Ah, the old days, Aurora Belle, full of precious things and even more precious memories. I'd smile, closing my book, my mind already drifting to the imagined scenes. She adored telling stories, but there was one particular memory she always skirted around. The twist in her cheerful narrative was the unspoken sorrow that would cloud her eyes whenever the topic of great-grandma Rose's emerald pendant came up. It was a legendary piece, passed down through generations, rumored to be breathtakingly beautiful. But it had vanished years ago, leaving a lingering shadow. You always make it sound like a fairy tale, Grandma. All those wonderful family gatherings and treasures. And the emerald pendant, oh, it was exquisite. Sparkled like 1,000 dewdrops on a summer morning. But then, poof, gone, never a trace. Her voice would trail off, a profound sadness replacing the usual sparkle in her eyes. I'd seen it before, this fleeting shadow. It was the way she'd describe the pendant, then abruptly change the subject or sigh deeply. A silence. Not a loud silence, but a subtle, recurring absence, like a note missing from a familiar melody. It was the way certain details about its disappearance simply never appeared in her vibrant recollections. One afternoon, I picked up an old, faded photograph of great-grandma Rose wearing the very pendant. It showed a vibrant young woman, her smile bright, the emerald gleaming. My finger traced the beautiful jewel, a detail that stirred something in my memory, a ghost from one of Grandma's half-told tales. Who's this, Grandma? This necklace, the emerald one, you never really talk about how it disappeared. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Grandma Elira's hands, which moments ago moved with such calm precision, paused midair. The dried petals she was holding fell silently to the table. Her gaze, usually so open and loving, clouded over for a fleeting moment. A tiny, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her, a ripple disturbing the otherwise placid surface. Oh, that old thing, it just got misplaced, dear, a long time ago. These things happen, so many belongings, things just get lost. Her voice, usually so rich with detail, was suddenly distant, almost brittle. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her features. Was it pain? Fear? A quick, almost defensive glance at me. Then, a forced cheerfulness returned, like a shutter quickly closing over a window, abruptly cutting off the light. Are you going to help me choose which vase these go in, dear? Or are you going to get lost in those old dusty memories all afternoon? I nodded slowly, a quiet acquiescence. But the image of the gleaming emerald, and the swift change in Grandma's demeanor, remained stubbornly fixed in my mind. That moment was a tiny, unsettling crack in the perfect facade of our family's joyful past. It wasn't just a lost object. It was a deliberate omission, an unspoken question that began to echo in the quiet afternoon air, growing louder with each passing moment, compelling me to seek answers where I knew they wouldn't be easily found. The feeling wasn't malicious, but a deep, cold certainty that beneath the warmth of her stories lay something fragile, something she desperately guarded. This heirloom wasn't simply lost. It was a silent testament to a truth she couldn't speak, pushing me towards the next step in uncovering our family's buried past. That night, sleep felt like a distant shore. The question of the emerald pendant, its mysterious disappearance, spun endlessly in my mind. It was a tiny stone thrown into the still pond of my grandmother's past, and the ripples were starting to spread, disturbing everything. The feeling was almost magnetic, pulling me back to my laptop, a digital detective on a quiet, personal quest. The dim glow of the screen felt like a portal, a secret window into the past. The image of the pendant, gleaming in great-grandma Rose's photograph, haunted me. Its beauty seemed to plead for its story to be heard, for its true fate to be revealed. A nagging curiosity, a sense of something unfinished, compelled me to search. I typed Rose Sterling Heirloom Emerald Pendant Missing and Sterling Family History Mysteries into the search bar, my fingers dancing across the keys, a frantic energy building inside. Hours melted away in the silent glow of the screen, each click a step deeper into the past. Finally, buried deep within a digitized archive of old family inventories and property records from a local historical society, I found it. An old, meticulously detailed list of great-grandma Rose's possessions, compiled after her passing. My heart thumped a little faster, a mixture of excitement and dread. Scrolling through the faded entries, past rows of furniture and silverware, I saw it. Clearer this time, listed with a specific, unique identifying number, Emerald Pendant, Sterling Family Heirloom. A surge of quiet triumph mixed with burgeoning apprehension. It was listed as transferred to safekeeping at a specific bank branch. Not lost, not stolen, transferred. This was the mini-hook, contradicting Grandma's story of it just being misplaced. Then, the twist, a chilling discovery. Tucked away in a forgotten corner of the same archive, a tiny, almost insignificant newspaper clipping from years after the supposed misplacement. The headline was stark, understated, yet resonated with a cold dread that spread through my veins. Prominent local family suffers financial setback, forced to liquidate assets. It was vague, frustratingly so, citing only personal reasons and unforeseen circumstances for the family's financial woes around the time the pendant disappeared. But the instinct, sharp and undeniable, screamed at me. This wasn't a simple loss. There was so much more to this story, a dark secret deliberately hidden. The article mentioned a period of extreme difficulty for the extended Sterling family, leading to drastic measures. A cold suspicion began to solidify, turning my blood to ice. If it was transferred for safekeeping, why the distress? Why the financial setbacks? Grandma Alara's sudden, defensive evasiveness when I'd mentioned the pendant. The way she had deliberately steered away from any mention of its disappearance. It all clicked into place, a dark, unsettling puzzle piece sliding into its predetermined slot, revealing a disturbing image. The innocent story of a misplaced heirloom now felt tainted, poisoned by this grim revelation. A chilling undercurrent of something deeply, irrevocably wrong, something that felt like a betrayal of trust, began to churn within me. This wasn't just history. This was a mystery unfolding, and I knew, with a growing sense of urgency, that I was only at the beginning of uncovering the truth. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, already searching for more, the next clue beckoning from the cold, hard facts of financial records. The next morning, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, usually a comforting embrace, now carried a faint, bitter edge of tension in the kitchen. It was a stark contrast to the previous day's cozy glow. Grandma Alara was humming softly, a fragile tune as she flipped pancakes, but even that gentle sound felt strained, anticipating the inevitable. I walked in, my laptop clutched tightly in my hands, its presence a silent accuser. My heart was a drum against my ribs, each beat echoing the weight of the knowledge I carried. Grandma, can we talk about the emerald pendant again? Really talk, her humming stopped abruptly. The spatula clattered to the tiled floor, a jarring sound in the sudden quiet. She turned slowly, her eyes, usually so warm, widening slightly as she saw the laptop. A flicker of fear, raw and unguarded, crossed her face before she could mask it. "Oh, that old thing, dear? It's been so long. What's there to talk about? Come have some pancakes, they're still warm." Her voice was forced, a desperate attempt to cling to the comfortable veneer of normalcy. But the warmth was gone, replaced by a thin, brittle quality. I knew this was it. This was the moment I had to push to uncover the truth, no matter how painful. "I found old records, Grandma. It says the pendant wasn't lost. It was transferred to the bank. And then, our family had financial troubles around that time." "What happened, Grandma? What really happened to the emerald pendant?" The words hung in the air, a bell tolling a forgotten memory. Grandma Alara's face drained of all color, turning ashen. Her hand flew to her mouth, trembling violently, a silent scream of recognition. "The bank. Oh, that was a long time ago. A very difficult time." Her voice was a mere whisper, a ghost of a sound, filled with an ancient, unbearable sorrow. This wasn't just about a lost heirloom. This was a wound festering for decades. The financial records and the newspaper article, they hint at something serious. Was someone responsible for it being gone? Was it something worse than just being sold? Grandma Alara turned away, walking slowly to the window, her back to me. The light seemed to fade around her, leaving her silhouetted, small and vulnerable against the bright morning. Her shoulders slumped, carrying an invisible burden. "It was a very long time ago, Aurora. Some things are better left undisturbed. Buried for the family's sake." Her voice was barely a breath, filled with a plea to let the past lie. But I couldn't, not anymore. The discovery of the pendant's true fate had changed everything. "But it involves our family, doesn't it?" "Who took it, Grandma? Who sold it?" The name, the question, hung heavy in the air. This was the moment of truth, the twist in this family drama. Grandma Alara slowly turned back, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, a silent torrent of pain. A furious battle raged in her gaze, a desperate, lifelong need to protect her family, warring with an overwhelming, crushing burden of guilt that had finally become too heavy to bear. It was agonizing to watch. It was your Aunt Caroline. My sister, she was in deep trouble, debts, a gambling problem that got out of control. She took the pendant, sold it without permission, and then she blamed Uncle Arthur, said he'd stolen it for another woman. It caused such a terrible fight. They never spoke again. Our family was torn apart. Her words were torn from her, ragged with emotion. She wasn't just admitting something, she was reliving it right there in front of me. The casual dismissal of lost couldn't hide the deep agony in her voice. "Aunt Caroline, but she always seemed so kind. And Uncle Arthur, he was ostracized for years. You covered it up to protect her. To protect the family from scandal." My voice, though calm, held an edge of accusation I couldn't hide. It was a statement, not a question. A bitter truth acknowledged. What else was I supposed to do? My parents, your great-grandparents, they would have been ruined by the scandal. the shame would have destroyed us. Our family, it would have been shattered into a million pieces. I truly thought I was doing what was right for everyone. Caroline promised she'd pay it back someday. And she cried, Aurora. She begged me to protect her. Arthur, he left town in a rage, never knew the real truth. The guilt, it has eaten at me every single day. She looked up, her eyes pleading, full of an ancient anguish that stretched back decades. Her desperation was palpable. I could almost see the young Alara, trapped, believing this was the only way to save her family. It was a heartbreaking glimpse into the impossible choices people make out of fear and misguided loyalty. The silence in the kitchen was now thick, heavy with the weight of generations of unspoken pain, a legacy of a lie. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the raw emotion that had just been unleashed, leaving us both exposed and vulnerable. This wasn't just Grandma's secret anymore. It was ours, now inextricably linked to the dark heart of our own family tree, and the path ahead was now agonizingly clear. The revelation about Aunt Caroline and the true fate of the emerald pendant had ripped open a gaping wound in our perception of the family. The air was still thick with the lingering shock of the confession. How could Aunt Caroline, the sweet, seemingly harmless relative who had always hovered around Grandma, be capable of such a calculated deception and betrayal? The thought was a jarring dissonance, a violation of everything we believed. We needed more. Tangible evidence, not just Grandma's tearful confession, to confront a truth so ugly it threatened to unravel the very foundations of our family. This wasn't just about curiosity. It was about a desperate need for justice, a burning anger on Grandma's behalf, and for the wronged Uncle Arthur. My personal quest now felt less like a search for a lost object and more like an investigation into a crime. The memory of the pendant, once a symbol of family legacy, now carried the heavy weight of deceit. My focus shifted to finding proof of the sale, the missing piece that would fully expose Caroline's actions and, hopefully, clear Uncle Arthur's name. This was the mini-hook, the hunt for tangible evidence that would confirm the depth of the betrayal. The journey led me to old auction house records, pawn shop logs, and obscure classified ads from years past. It was like sifting through the dust of forgotten lives, each document potentially holding a clue. The imposing, almost intimidating facades of these old institutions seemed to guard their secrets with an unyielding stoicism. Getting information from them was a nightmare. It was like pulling teeth from a concrete wall, every step met with bureaucratic resistance, evasive answers, and endless paperwork. Days bled into weeks of endless phone calls, navigating labyrinthine bureaucratic hurdles, and filling out mountains of tedious legal papers, each one a test of my dwindling patience and a slow, agonizing burn of frustration. The weight of the delay gnawed at me, a fear that we might never uncover the full extent of Caroline's betrayal and clear Arthur's name. Max, with his analytical mind, became an invaluable ally, relentlessly focused. His composure stretched thin by the frustrating dead ends, but his determination only growing with each closed door and evasive answer. His quiet fury, a palpable force, became the engine of our progress, pushing us forward relentlessly, his frustration a silent roar, fueling his relentless pursuit of truth. Lily, her usual bubbly energy replaced by an almost frantic edge, her emotions raw and exposed, frayed by the endless delays, finally broke. "This is ridiculous." She burst out one afternoon after another dead-end phone call, slamming the receiver down with a frustrated cry that bordered on a desperate wail. "They're making it impossible. Maybe Grandma just made a mistake. Maybe there's nothing here and we're just chasing ghosts, embarrassing ourselves, wasting our time while we should be focusing on healing." Her words, though born of frustration, hit a nerve. Was it possible we were wrong? Was this all a painful misunderstanding? A seed of doubt, cold and sharp, began to sprout. But the gut feeling, the raw emotion from Grandma's confession, was too strong to ignore. We pushed on, fueled by a grim resolve. The tension in the air was palpable, a growing unease that this discovery, this truth, might not bring closure, but instead, an even deeper chasm within our family. The fight was far from over. It was only just beginning, and we braced ourselves for the next revelation, however devastating it might be. The search for the pendant's paper trail became a tense race against time and fading memories, leading us to the chilling twist of discovering a forged document, meticulously crafted to implicate Uncle Arthur, a further layer of calculated cruelty from Caroline. The forged document, discovered amidst dusty bank archives, a meticulous, chillingly believable lie pointing fingers squarely at Uncle Arthur, solidified our grim suspicion. This wasn't just a moment of weakness from Aunt Caroline. It was a calculated, deliberate act of deception designed to frame an innocent man and cover her tracks. The moral lines blurred, and a deeper, more unsettling question emerged. What could drive someone to such desperate measures? This was our mini-hook, delving into the psyche behind the betrayal. Driven by a mix of dread and a desperate need for understanding, we dove deeper into Caroline's past. We found old town records, forgotten newspaper archives, and even spoke to distant relatives who remembered the era. What we uncovered was a grim mosaic of her youth, far more troubled than anyone had imagined. Caroline, a bright girl with a taste for the finer things, had indeed fallen prey to a gambling addiction in her early 20s. It wasn't just a con artist, as Grandma initially suspected, but a self-destructive spiral that left her deeply in debt, desperate, and utterly alone. Grandma Alara, ever the protector, had repeatedly tried to help her, quietly paying off smaller debts, believing she was saving her sister from public shame. It painted a picture of Caroline not just as a villain, but as a deeply flawed individual consumed by her own addiction, a victim of her own destructive impulses first, then a perpetrator driven by a desperate, selfish need. The twist came when we found evidence of a second, much larger hidden debt, incurred just months before the pendant's disappearance. This wasn't merely about old gambling debts. It was a fresh, crushing burden that pushed her to the brink. She hadn't sold the pendant just to cover initial debts. She sold it to stave off an immediate, devastating financial collapse that would have exposed her secret life to the entire family. And the lie about Uncle Arthur. It wasn't random. He had recently had a public disagreement with Caroline about her spending habits, making him an easy and convenient scapegoat in her desperate scramble to avoid accountability. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin escalated as the full scope of Caroline's calculated deception became horrifyingly clear. She hadn't just taken an heirloom. She had sacrificed her sister's trust and an innocent man's reputation to protect her own hidden shame. This revelation, colder than any legal document, ignited a searing anger within me, a profound sense of betrayal not just for Grandma, but for the fundamental trust within our family. How could someone so close, someone Grandma literally tried to save, be capable of such calculated cruelty, pushing the blame onto another to save herself? The moral complexity of it gnawed at me. Pity for Caroline's past struggles with addiction warred with a burning indignation for her actions. This wasn't just a narrative of villainy. It was a tragic dance of addiction, desperation, exploitation, and devastating silence. The air in the room felt heavy, pregnant with the bitter taste of truth, leading us to the inevitable, explosive confrontation. The decision to confront Aunt Caroline was excruciating. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and furious resolve. We chose a neutral location, a quiet cafe, hoping the public setting might temper the inevitable explosion. But there was no preparing for the storm. As Caroline, with her usual sweet, almost fragile smile, took a sip of her tea, I laid the forged document on the table, alongside the bank statements detailing the pendant's sale. These were the tangible pieces of her deception. Its official appearance, an innocent object, became a weapon. Aunt Caroline, we need to talk about the emerald pendant. And about Uncle Arthur, we know the truth. Her smile vanished. Her hand, holding the teacup, froze, then began to tremble violently. Her eyes darted between the documents and our faces, a desperate, cornered animal look. For a fleeting moment, I saw genuine fear, a rare vulnerability. Then the facade cracked, replaced by a defensive, almost aggressive denial, her voice rising in a frantic, almost shrill pitch. "What are you talking about? What truth? That's ancient history. Arthur stole it, everyone knows that. Why are you bringing up old nonsense? Grandma would never want this." The twist came when Max calmly slid a printout of the hidden debt records across the table, showing the second, massive debt incurred right before the pendant disappeared. The neatly printed columns, the dates, the amounts, undeniable proof of her deeper desperation. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale and sickly. Her eyes scanned the documents, searching for an escape for a new lie but finding none. Her carefully constructed world of innocence crumbled before us, revealing the manipulative core beneath. "No, this is a lie. You're trying to ruin me. Grandma loved me. She never told you this." The confession, when it finally came, was a devastating torrent. Her voice, ragged with a mix of rage, fear, and a desperate, long-buried shame, finally broke. She confessed to selling the pendant to cover her gambling debts, the desperate fear of exposure driving her. She admitted to fabricating the story about Uncle Arthur and forging the document to shift the blame, playing on his existing tension with Grandma. The abuse of trust. The deliberate, cruel act that caused Arthur's exile and the deep fracture in the family. It was a story of a desperate, cornered individual, yes, but one whose desperation had led to monstrous acts, betraying love and trust to save herself. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin reached its peak as her carefully constructed life shattered into 1,000 pieces, revealing the bitter, self-serving core beneath. A glimmer of remorse, fleeting and quickly swallowed by self-preservation, flashed in her eyes as she spoke of her addiction and the shame that drove her, her voice cracking with the pain of her own long-held secrets. But it was quickly overshadowed by the chilling awareness of her intentional cruelty and the years of suffering she inflicted. The air in the cafe, once quiet, now felt charged with the echoes of a broken past, a devastating truth finally brought to light. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was an exorcism of a decades-old lie, leaving us all breathless, reeling from the raw, exposed pain, knowing the next step was to expose it to the entire family. Part 7. Revealing the truth to the family and its aftermaths. The raw confession from Aunt Caroline, a devastating secret finally unearthed, left us reeling. But the heaviest burden still lay ahead, bringing this shattered truth to the rest of the family. There was no easy way to tell them that the sweet, unassuming Aunt Caroline they knew was a perpetrator, and that Grandma Alara had carried such a profound, painful secret to protect her. We decided on a quiet family gathering, hoping to soften the blow. The atmosphere was initially light, filled with chatter and the familiar warmth of kinship, a stark contrast to the bombshell we were about to drop. This was the mini-hook. The quiet before the storm, the tension of knowing what was coming. Then I spoke. My voice, though firm, trembled slightly as I began to recount the story, starting with the mystery of the missing pendant, the old records, and finally, Grandma's tearful confession. As I described the betrayal and the framing of Uncle Arthur, the room began to fall silent. Faces, initially curious, twisted into expressions of confusion, then disbelief. Lily's eyes welled up, reliving the initial pain of discovery. Max stood silently beside me, his presence a rock of support, his gaze unwavering, reinforcing the gravity of my words. The twist came when I revealed Caroline's full confession, coupled with the undeniable evidence of the bank transfers, the hidden debts, and the forged document. The room erupted. Devastating shock gave way to volatile chaos. Uncle Arthur's children, who had grown up believing their father was a thief, were consumed by a righteous fury mixed with profound grief for their father's tarnished reputation. Cousins argued, some vehemently denying, clinging to the image of good old Aunt Caroline, others grappling with the horrifying implications. Bitter divisions instantly formed, tearing at the fabric of our seemingly united family. Grandma's siblings, those still alive, were consumed by grief and anger, not just at Caroline, but at the decades of silence, the truth hidden from them. It was a brutal, raw spectacle of betrayal and confusion, the deepest wounds exposed for all to see, as accusations flew and alliances shattered. The aftermath was a long-term fallout. Family gatherings became awkward, strained silences punctuated by simmering resentment. Some chose sides, others retreated entirely, unable to cope with the shattered facade. It was heartbreaking to witness the fracturing of what I had always considered an unbreakable bond. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was also a glimmer of morbid relief. The truth, however painful, was finally out. The silence had been broken, allowing the festering wound to begin, however slowly, to heal. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin wasn't in a single dramatic climax, but in the slow, agonizing unraveling of a family myth, replaced by a raw, uncomfortable, yet ultimately liberating reality. This wasn't the end of our struggle. It was merely the bitter beginning of true healing, a journey that would redefine what family truly meant and how much trust truly mattered. The family's reaction, a maelstrom of anger, grief, and confusion, left me utterly exhausted, emotionally drained. The shattering of our family myth was far more volatile than I had anticipated. Yet, amidst the chaos, a more personal reckoning loomed: Uncle Arthur. He was at the epicenter of this storm, not just as the victim of a grave injustice, but as the one who had carried the undeserved shame for decades. His absence from family life, his self-imposed exile, was a direct consequence of Caroline's lie. Our challenge was to find him and present him with the truth that had ruined his reputation and his relationship with his family. I approached him days later, after countless phone calls and a hesitant letter, finding him alone in his secluded home, a stark contrast to the vibrant man I'd heard stories about. He looked older, hardened by years of bitterness. There was no anger left in him when he finally agreed to meet, only a profound weariness. This was my mini-hook, the once vibrant Uncle Arthur, now a shadow of his former self, given a chance at redemption. Uncle Arthur, we know the truth about the pendant, about Caroline, about everything. He flinched, his head bowing slightly. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. What followed was not a furious outburst, but a raw, painful unburdening, a lifetime of suppressed pain finally pouring out. He spoke of his confusion, his rage, his disbelief when he was accused, and the deep, abiding hurt of being ostracized by his own family. He had carried the shame, believing his sister had truly betrayed him without explanation. He articulated the profound guilt that had shadowed his entire life, the the secret that had warped his understanding of his family and kept him from true peace. This was the twist. The realization that Arthur, too, had been a prisoner of Caroline's lie and the family's silence, losing decades of connection and happiness. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin here was internal, a quiet, devastating unraveling of a man's lifelong burden. I always wondered, why? Why would she do that? Why would Grandma let it happen? I never stopped thinking about it. It just ate away at me. His voice was hoarse, thick with unshed tears. This wasn't absolution, but it was a crucial step towards understanding. His raw vulnerability was startling. It didn't erase the pain he suffered, but it humanized his struggle, revealing the long-term psychological toll of a hidden betrayal. The atmosphere shifted from tension to a fragile introspection. He didn't immediately forgive, but he expressed a desperate need for answers, for the complete picture. It marked the beginning of his new path, a path of quiet strength and emerging purpose, seeking to reclaim his name and his place. The encounter was exhausting, but it was a necessary cleansing, a painful unburdening that transitioned us towards the possibility of fractured, but real healing for everyone involved, especially for the family branches that had been separated for so long. Part 9, The Slow Path to Reconciliation. The aftermath of Aunt Caroline's confrontation and Uncle Arthur's tearful confession left our family deeply scarred, yet strangely, irrevocably altered. The initial volatile chaos gave way to a somber, fragile quiet. It was clear that the bonds, once thought unbreakable, were now fundamentally changed. This wasn't a sudden, Hollywood-style reconciliation. It was a long, arduous process, marked by tentative steps and a profound acknowledgement of the pain that had festered for decades. The mini-hook was the almost unbearable awkwardness of our first post-revelation family dinner. The air was thick with unspoken questions, with accusations hanging unspoken yet palpable. Yet, despite the deep wounds, a remarkable thing began to happen. The truth, however ugly, began to act as a strange kind of antiseptic. Max, ever the anchor, initiated family therapy sessions, a neutral ground where the bitter divisions could slowly, painfully be aired. Lily, with her pure heart, became a bridge, her innocent grief allowing others to express their own. We talked, we argued, we cried. Old grievances surfaced, not just about Caroline and Arthur, but about decades of minor slights and misunderstandings, all exacerbated by a culture of silence. This was the twist. The revelation about the pendant became a catalyst, forcing the entire family to confront not just one secret, but the pervasive pattern of unspoken issues that had always simmered beneath the surface. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin here was the slow, painful process of deconstruction, tearing down walls that had stood for generations. The path to reconciliation was not linear. Some relatives, unwilling or unable to face the harsh realities, chose to remain estranged. The wounds were too deep, the betrayals too personal. But for many, including Uncle Arthur, who now actively participated in therapy and slowly began to reconnect with his nieces and nephews, a tentative healing began. The process of finding the true story of the pendant became a collective family mission, a shared act of atonement. We pooled resources, followed every lead, pouring our collective energy into understanding the past and supporting each other through the raw emotions. There was a quiet dignity in this shared purpose, a sense that we were not just seeking individual justice, but seeking our own collective redemption. This painful journey led to unexpected connections, to a deeper, more honest understanding of each other, stripped of pretense. We learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about acknowledging the pain, accepting the imperfections, and choosing to rebuild, one fragile brick at a time. The fragile hope, now tinged with ongoing grief for the lost years and the damage done, led us toward tentative steps forward, creating deepened connections forged in the crucible of shared truth. The journey was not about erasing the past, but about bravely facing it, accepting its scars, and slowly, painstakingly, moving towards a future built on honesty and true understanding. Years passed, marked by quiet progress and the slow, arduous work of healing. The final chapters of this story unfolded not with a grand, dramatic flourish, but with the gentle, profound cadence of life lived honestly. The culmination of our long journey wasn't about retrieving the emerald pendant. That beautiful heirloom was long gone, sold and melted down decades ago. Instead, it was about retrieving something far more valuable: our family's truth, and with it, a chance at genuine connection. Uncle Arthur, though still bearing the scars of his wrongful accusation, gradually found peace. He reconnected with his siblings, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding of the complex web of fear and misguided protection that had entangled them all. Our journey had transformed us. Uncle Arthur, deeply changed by his reckoning, dedicated his retirement to volunteering at a local community center, finding purpose in helping others navigate complex family dynamics, quietly seeking to atone for the misunderstanding that had defined so much of his life. Lily found her voice, becoming a passionate advocate for honesty and open communication within families, carrying Grandma Alara's lessons forward, ensuring no other family would suffer in silent despair. For me, the meaning of inheritance had expanded far beyond possessions. It was the inheritance of truth, of resilience, of the complex, flawed, yet enduring power of family. It highlighted the deeper meaning of the inheritance, not just in what was given, but in what was learned, endured, and ultimately healed. This story, our story, became a profound thought, a lasting lesson. It taught us that silence, while sometimes born of love or protection, can be a heavy burden, a destructive force that poisons generations, leading to devastating misunderstandings and irreparable rifts. But honesty, however painful, holds the power to liberate, to heal, and to forge stronger, more authentic bonds. The true legacy isn't in what's hidden, but in the courage to reveal, to acknowledge, and to mend. It's about recognizing that every family has its shadows, but it's in bringing those shadows into the light that we find our true strength. The missing heirloom was never just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of a hidden wound that, once exposed and understood, allowed our family to finally begin to truly live. Thank you for listening to The Missing Heirloom. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more real stories from the past. Until next time, remember that the most profound lessons are often found in the quietest corners of our shared human experience. Farewell.